And we begin tonight with the first televised hearing in Fani Willis' criminal case against former President Trump in Georgia. I'm Jason Johnson, in tonight for Joy Reid. The trial will be televised and is coming very soon. Today, we got a taste of what's to come. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee said he would not allow Kenneth Chesebro to sever his case from Sidney Powell. Chesebro and Powell are among the 19 defendants in the Georgia racketeering case. They have both asked for speedy trials. Chesebro is accused of being the, quote, architect of the Trump elector scheme, while Sidney Powell is facing a slew of charges that include an effort to improperly access voting machines in rural Coffee County, Georgia. The defendants said their cases were different and they wanted to be tried separately. Prosecutor Wooten's response, that ain't the way this works.
So we've heard a lot from both defendants about they didn't know the other people. They were located thousands of miles apart. They didn't even know that the other parts of the conspiracy were going on. But the case law is clear that that does not matter. Of course, anytime a person enters into a conspiracy, they are liable for all of the acts of all of their co-conspirators. And that's it. Evidence against one is evidence against all.
The prosecutor also reminded the court who this case is really about.
Part of this RICO conspiracy involves victims. There are victims in this case that were targeted by members of the enterprise, and their lives were turned upside down. And that's an important part of this case, and having those people come and testify multiple times over and over would both inconvenience, but more importantly, traumatize them.
McAfee denied the defendant's request, meaning Chesebro and Powell will stand trial together beginning on October 23rd. The judge is yet to schedule a date for the other 17 co-defendants, including Donald Trump. Earlier in the hearing, a prosecutor told McAfee that holding a joint trial for Trump and the other defendants would take 4 months to complete, with testimony from potentially more than 150 witnesses. That timeline doesn't even account for jury selection. All 19 defendants charged in the Fulton County case, including Trump, have pleaded not guilty and waived their right to an in-person arraignment, which have been scheduled for today. This marks the 4th time that Trump has formally denied charges this year. The judge said he was, quote, very skeptical of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis's plan to put all 19 defendants, including Trump, on trial next month, adding that the plan seemed, quote, a bit unrealistic, given some of the complex legal and practical issues in the sprawling case. But he said he'd consider additional arguments. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Katie Phang, MSNBC legal contributor and host of The Katie Phang Show on Saturdays, Greg Bluestein, MSNBC political contributor and political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and David Jolly, MSNBC political analyst and former Republican congressman from Florida, who is no longer affiliated with that party. Katie Phang, we're going to start with you. You're down there in Atlanta. The judge is basically saying, hey, I appreciate the effort. I don't think you're going to be able to do this. What are some of the potential roadblocks here? Man, I think it's reasonable to say that trying, 17 people at the same time could be tough. What are the concerns from a legal standpoint about that? Does he feel that the case would get jumbled? Does he feel that people who are guilty would end up getting off? What's the real concern there?
Yeah, so Jason, that's a really good question, and it actually didn't get that deep. It was a kind of interesting exchange that was happening between Judge Scott McAfee at the state of Georgia, as well as defense attorneys for Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell. It was kind of who's going to blink first. I got to give credit to DA Fani Willis's team. She put the kind of best of the best that she could in front of the judge today to basically say, Judge, we're ready to go. We're prepared to do all 19 defendants at one time with more than 150 witnesses. It'll take about 4 months, not including, jury selection. But the concerns that Judge McAfee raised were all valid ones, and they ran the gamut, Jason, from, logistical concerns. How do I practically fit 19 defendants in one courtroom with all of their counsel? And I go through the process of not only pretrial motions, having them set for hearing, litigating them, getting rulings, and then going through jury selection. And then it actually went to the point of, if there's not enough prejudice that each of the defendants is facing that would merit the idea that they had to be tried on their own. So maybe I do buy into this idea that we're going to do 19 defendants at one time. What happens to the removal defendants? Are they still there? Have they gone to federal court and come back if the state has successfully won an appeal on that issue? And so there was a lot that Judge McAfee clearly had contemplated before today's hearing. The fact that he ruled immediately from the bench was a welcome thing. We always want to have the swift ruling from a judge, but we are waiting to hear the ultimate disposition, which is, will it be one trial, 19 defendants, or are we going to see two different trial settings? One on October 23rd for Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell, and then one way later on down the road for the remaining 17 defendants.
Kate, I want to follow up on this because I wonder about this in the same way from a practical standpoint. Would it be possible that there would be a trial where, multiple defendants would be in, say, Zooms, and they would Zoom in on the trial, and they would have to lean out and speak to their legal counsel? Does the legal counsel have to be there? Like, just as a logistics matter, how could you try 17 people at once?
Well, they actually would all have to appear in person. The Fulton County Courthouse is open and back to business. And so there are no Zoom trials that are being actually conducted behind me in the courthouse. And so you'd literally have everybody in one courtroom. And then what would happen is you would have each of the lawyers, and I kind of want to really set this up for people because they are wondering exactly the machinations on this. Each lawyer, Jason, has the chance to not only question potential jurors, but also be able to cross-examine the government's witnesses. 150 of them. Can you imagine if each of them had the chance to get up and do cross-examination? It literally would last way longer than 4 months. And so I think Judge McAfee actually told the state, be careful what you wish for. I know you're ready to go, but there's a lot of stuff that I still need you to brief. And so I want you to do it by next week, Tuesday, because you need to answer some of these questions before I set a trial.
Greg, Fani Willis filed late today. She put in sort of her motions. There's some interesting things here I want to get your thoughts on. In the motion, she said, based on the doxing of Fulton County grand jurors and the Fulton County district attorney, it is clearly foreseeable that trial jurors will likely be doxed should their names be made available to the public. If that were to happen, the effect on jurors' ability to decide the issues before them impartially and without outside influence would undoubtedly be placed in jeopardy. Basically, what we're hearing here from DA Willis, Greg, is that there are going to be cameras in the courtroom, but due efforts are being made to keep these jurors sort of anonymous and safe. Is that one of the major concerns that people are thinking of downtown? Is it one of those things where it's like, OK, that's part of it, but we still think they'll be going to, are they going to have to be sequestered? What are sort of the thoughts about this idea of how to keep jurors safe?
Yeah, certainly, Jason, because there's a century-old case law in Georgia that allows the public dissemination of the names of special grand jurors and grand jurors. And we saw just a few weeks ago their names of the grand jurors who successfully indicted former President Trump and the 18 other co-defendants were being plastered all over social media. They were being put on a Russian-hosted website with confidential information. They were being targeted by far-right conspiracy theorist websites. So now Fani Willis actually disclosed that she, too, has been targeted on this same Russian-hosted web server. So she's using that as an example of why she wants the judge to restrict the publicization of the names of the potential jurors for when they get to that stage in this trial.
Greg, we've talked about this in the past, about the need for security once this trial actually begins. October, we don't know if it's going to be separate trials or together trials. Is there any effort being made by Governor Kemp to make sure that jurors are safe? Our private security people, our state security people, is the GBI. Like, who's making sure that these people are safe when they go home? Or might we see a situation where every juror in this case ends up being sequestered?
Yeah, the Georgia State Patrol is one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the state, and the state capitol is just a few blocks away from the Fulton County Courthouse. So we certainly saw the last few weeks a heavy security presence from state patrol officers. I imagine we'll see the same coordination going forward, especially as this trial gets underway under heavy security. But remember, too, Fulton County, the city of Atlanta, they have enormous law enforcement agencies as well. So they have a number of officers at their disposal.
David Jolly, one of the things, you're a lawyer, you understand these things. I've watched enough legal shows to understand this. Usually, the corner boys, the small-ended people, they will flip on the bigger guys, right? They're the ones who are going to say, hey, I don't want to be involved with this one way or another. I have to ask you, do we think as we get closer to any of these trial dates, that someone's going to flip. There's got to be somebody at a lower level who's like, I'm not trying to go to jail for this. I'll flip on Trump. Do you think that's likely to happen? And do you think it's going to happen before October, or will it happen after the trial begins?
Yes, statistically, you are exactly right, Jason. Somebody is likely to say, hey, I would like to cooperate if Fani Willis is willing to at this point. You know, it also requires her to suggest she's doing that. There's a basic theory in criminal defense called prisoner's dilemma, which is when you have multiple defendants, logically, if they all stick together, perhaps they have a good chance of defending themselves. But if one of them acts in self-interest and turns on the other, obviously that person can save their own freedom. And so who flips first becomes a bit of the dilemma and the question. So yes, I would expect we see some of the lesser, but look, Fani Willis's team made very clear today that every one of these 19 defendants is a peer. Donald Trump, yes, absolutely stands out among all of them, but he stands charged with the same statute that Sidney Powell does, and Chesborough and Eastman and Mark Meadows, and all of them now stand in equal stead. I think what's fascinating is if indeed we see two trials, like Katie said. So the judge today denied severance, saying we're not going to sever Chesborough and Powell. But it appears he might be willing to consider the class of defendants who want a speedy trial, Chesborough and Powell together, maybe Eastman, and then the remaining ones down the road. That actually sets up where we might have a verdict, either a conviction or an acquittal in that first case, before the primary in the Republican Party for the presidential nomination and before Donald Trump's determination. And so does that change a political dynamic or narrative? Perhaps. We just don't know.